Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I'm your host, Attorney Henry Gornbein. Today on Gracefully Graying, I'm very pleased to welcome as our guest Tammi Gripton of the Senior Care Authority as she helps us navigate some of the difficult choices for seniors and their loved ones as they are aging. Tammi, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It was a pleasure having you. First of all, why don't you tell our viewers a little about your background? And I know I read a little bit about you and you were a teacher. What did you teach?
I taught kindergarten. I taught kindergarten for 15 years in a Romeo community school, so in Macomb County. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And then my husband took a job and we moved overseas. So I had to quit the job teaching kindergarten, and we lived in Singapore for 3 years. My family and I did. And then when we came back, I just didn't feel like teaching fit anymore. So I spent some time trying to figure out what was going to work best for me. So eventually I found Senior Care Authority. So when I was in college, I debated between teaching and social work. And I eventually chose teaching, but there was always kind of a feeling in my heart that social work might be kind of better for me long term. Anyway, it was around 2019 when we got back home from Singapore, and I had been just trying to re-Americanize my children. I have 3 kids. And someone came and was selling franchises. Well, I had kind of reached out to them because I was looking at different kind of options, and I didn't know senior placement existed. And they told me that it is basically social work. I definitely do a lot of work with people and families, and helping them through difficult times. And so I was very attracted to that, and eventually I bought the franchise, and I've been running Senior Care Authority for 6 years now. So basically my company, Senior Care Authority, is a free placement and referral service. So I help families who are in a situation, potentially maybe someone went to the hospital and with like a broken hip, just for an example, and they can't go home quite yet. They need to get stronger. So they're looking for, their days ran out of Medicare covered days, because that's a whole thing. And so they needed some place to get stronger for a little while, sometimes long-term, sometimes short-term. And I help them find the right place in independent living, assisted living, and memory care. And AFCs or residential care communities as well. So basically what happens is families.
Let me jump in. I'm going to ask some more questions.
Oh,
First
sure.
of all, the demographics are such that the majority of our population, not only in Michigan, but nationwide, is the demographics that you're dealing with. There are people, the majority of our population are over 50. And one thing I'd like to ask you, what are the 7 signs that your family may need help?
Okay. Well, so the 7 signs that family may need help is if you're going to visit with your family member, your senior family member, and there's poor or declining personal hygiene. So you go over, maybe there's smells that you didn't, they were usually very clean and it's not so clean. Maybe the, unsafe behaviors such as unlocked doors, stove left on, water running, spoiled or inadequate food in the refrigerator, unpleasant odors in the home, stacks of unopened mail or unpaid bills, confusion about time and place, or escalating family disagreements about care choices. So maybe you and your sibling aren't quite agreeing on what needs to happen. Sometimes that might be a good opportunity to reach out to someone who does elder care consulting and placement services to help families figure out what's going to work best for their loved one.
Tammi, let's go through. You mentioned the different types of adult senior living Let's start one by one and you can define the differences. First of all, independent living.
So independent living is it's a place that usually is somewhat larger, and they charge for rent and then a la carte services. So maybe you just need medication management and you don't want to pay someone to come to your house to do that. So you go there, it's a lot cheaper to pay for just someone to help with medication management. Independent living can do a lot more care than that, but most of the time, I think it's most appropriate for independent living. If you just want to be around someone, meals are provided. That's kind of included in your rent. And some places, laundry is free. Sometimes they charge you for laundry if you need help with that. And then they charge per care. So maybe you need medication management. Maybe you need shower assistance. Maybe you need a little bit of help getting dressed. Those types of things are really a great option for people looking for independent living. I don't know, did you ask me for all of them or just independent living right
Just
now?
independent. And what are the typical costs for independent living?
Well, it depends, right? There are some services that we can potentially couple with it that are with the government that sometimes can have it start as low as, $2,000 a month, and it goes up from there, depending on how fancy or unfancy you're looking for. So that would just be rent, and then you pay per care level. So it can start as low as $2,000 and go all the way up to, $6,000. Just depends on how much care you need. So sometimes if you need more care, independent living isn't probably going to be the best option for you financially. Sometimes assisted living is better if you need more care.
Now tell us about assisted living. Let's talk about the parameters of that.
So assisted living is always licensed by the state. Well, it always, any place I work with is always licensed with the state of Michigan. So, so they always come with meals the same as independent living, and they can sometimes do a lot more care. So maybe you're having some incontinence needs. Assisted living can help with that. It can help with just medication management as well, if that's the kind of care you think, if you think you're going to get worse. Usually the way they charge for assisted living is they charge a rent price and then they charge a care price. And the care price has more than one amount of care kind of packaged into one amount. That's best for families where they just want it all to be taken care of. So when you're moving in, they do a full assessment, and if you need a little more care, maybe incontinence need, maybe you need some help transferring from the bed to a chair, or a little bit more care than independent living. Independent living is more for people who are looking for socialization, are capable of managing their own care. Assisted living is more for people who maybe need a little bit of help managing their own care as well. Sometimes they'll let you come in slightly confused in assisted living, but if you're someone that is potentially going to walk out the front door in an unsafe manner, then assisted living probably is not going to be right for you.
What are typical price points for assisted living facilities?
Well, usually you can start at around 5,000, maybe 4,500 to 5,000, and it goes up from there. And that's per month. Most places that we work with charge a month-to-month basis. So you move in, and if you like it, you stay. And if you don't, you can give them a 30-day notice. Some places have a 60-day notice, and you can leave if it doesn't work out for you.
Tammi, next, what about memory care?
So memory care is more of a community that is for people who are suffering from dementia. They're confused and they need help basically managing everything in their life. So they need lots of cueing and reminders. Sometimes people get agitated and they need someone to just help them navigate all areas of life with lots of reminders. And it's usually a locked unit because if you feel like you need, we don't want you walking out the front door in a situation where you could potentially put yourself in harm's way.
What about the most extreme situations where someone really cannot physically take care of himself or herself and has lost basically all cognitive ability? Where do you go at that? Is that still memory care or is there something
Still
more?
memory care. Sometimes that costs a little bit more, but it's definitely still memory care. And it depends if you're physical. There are certain communities that would not want you to go there if maybe you feel violent. Some people do. I know it's tragic that happens, but there are some communities that will help in those situations and some that definitely are not going to be appropriate. If you're a harm to yourself or others, we work with the doctors to try and help you be.
And what are the cost levels again for memory care facilities?
Well, memory care is going to be more than assisted living. It usually starts about 6,000 and goes up from there, depending on how much care you need, how much cueing you need. I also know of a few communities that have all-inclusive care. So if you move in either assisted living or memory care, their licensing is a licensed assisted living or a licensed memory care community, but the pricing is all inclusive. So it's going to be usually a little more than assisted living, but depends on, if you have any behaviors or if you're just quietly forgetful, if you get what I'm saying.
Tammi, a lot of facilities have various levels of care, and you have first couple of floors will be just basic living facilities for those who perhaps are disabled, perhaps they're just aging. And then you have a memory care unit that usually is locked often on a third floor of a facility. What about the fact that there are large facilities versus now we have group homes, which often have maybe 6 people residing in a group home? Tell us about those.
Okay, so those are usually licensed through the state of Michigan. They're called adult foster care homes, and you might find them in a neighborhood. They're licensed for 6 people. Sometimes that's a really good option for families. Sometimes if they only have 6 people in there, so they have 1 in 6 is the caregiver ratio. Some communities even have 2 caregivers for 6 people. So if there's an issue with pricing, sometimes that can be a cheaper option, sometimes not. Sometimes it's just more care. And if you're somebody that needs an awful lot of attention and a lot of care and you really want that for your family member, that can be a really good option. And we do work with quite a few adult foster care communities or group homes. Most of the time when they're licensed, that's what their licensing is under through the state of Michigan.
What are typical costs for the group homes or foster care communities that you've just mentioned?
Well, depending on where you move in. So we do have some lower income ones that you start, if you wanted a shared room, it could start at 3,500. If you wanted your own room, because it's a 6-bed home. So there are some shared rooms and some private rooms. It's going to be more. Some are, if you wanted a private room, it starts at around 5,000 and goes up from there. But you can get a lot more care in those homes as well. A lot of times it's people with dementia who just need a lot of attention. That those kind of care homes, it's a little bit a better price point and also a little bit more care. It just depends on the family and the socialization needs of the client, right? So if your parent is someone that's really outgoing, being in a 6-person care home might not be your best, be something you want. But if they're introverted and they kind of like to stay around their own, just be quiet and not maybe 1 or 2 people is enough for them, it could be a really good option financially as well as care wise.
Tammi, how do you determine the level of care that a loved one needs?
So it's a pretty in-depth assessment. So I will ask them all kinds of questions on how much care they need. The questions would be, do you have diabetes? How do you walk? Can you walk? Do you use a walker? Do you use a wheelchair? Or about your family member, right? How are they getting around? How are they getting out of bed, right? Does it take one person can they do it themselves? Does it take one person to help them get out of bed? Does it take two people to get out of bed? Do they use something called a Hoyer lift, which is a mechanism that helps them get out of bed? It's also incontinence needs, right? If you wear briefs or depends, that could be part of the care. I basically talk to either the senior or whoever is their power of attorney or their spouse to get all kinds of information. It usually takes about 45 minutes with a bunch of questions about exactly how much care they need. And then once I get all that information, I look at it and decide whether I think it would be independent living, assisted living, or memory care. Usually, if it's more care, but their brain is clear, an assisted living community would be better. If they are confused and been diagnosed with dementia, memory care, depending on the level of confusion. And then also if the family members are worried about the budget, sometimes we can help with an AFC, a residential care home, group home. Those are the same kind of words for the same thing. And also that can be if they need more care.
Tammi, how do you determine the best location for a loved one?
So that's a good question. And different families have lots of different answers. So I talk to the family member. I usually talk to the power of attorney, but I also ask if they have siblings. I need to know all of their names. I need to know where they all live. And then we talk through it, right? Like, okay, so if this is where you live and you're the decision maker, but let's talk to the other siblings as well, because they're everybody's parent, right? And or if it's a spouse, we try and make it so that all family members are agreeing to the area, which, sometimes that can be hard, but we usually, obviously, the person who is the number one decision maker that the client, who is the senior, has designated as the number one person to make the decision, eventually makes the final decision. But I definitely, when I'm working with them, try and get everybody's opinion as well.
Tammi, often families agree to disagree. And I guess this is where your social worker hat would come into play. You're meeting with a family who has a parent or perhaps an older sibling who needs some type of care, but there's a lot of disagreement, or perhaps one family member is in denial. How do you navigate some of these rough disagreements about care choices?
Well, that is tricky. And I try and do it with empathy and as much care as I can, because I know that all of the people who are there are making decisions out of love. At least that's the way I choose to think about things. So I do physically go on tours with family. So after we've talked about the amount of care, what area you want to live in, and how much money you want to spend, we schedule tours. And I usually try and include as many people as are willing and have the time period to go with us on the tours, so that we can find something that's in it for everyone. And while I'm touring with the families, I'm listening to everybody. And sometimes I'll pull one or two people aside and we'll kind of have a little conversation. Like I said, ultimately at the end, the client has chosen who they want to be their decision makers. And it might not be all of the kids. If you have 5 kids, you may have 2 that are the number one decision makers. I want to make everybody on the same page, but as you know, that sometimes isn't possible, but we try our best to make it so that everybody feels comfortable with the decision.
Tammi, you mentioned that you visit a lot of facilities, so you must have some type of rating system. I mean, I've been told that some facilities, they're bright and shiny on the exterior, but maybe the level of care isn't up to par, and others may look more run down, but there's better care given. How do you evaluate some of these facilities, and tell us about some of the situations you've been involved in?
Well, so you're right that some of the places could be bright and shiny on the outside, but maybe not the care that you're looking for. So we don't suggest ever. I have a team that works with me as well. We never suggest any community unless we've been there first. So we've and I ultimately am the one who makes the decision on whether we work with them or not. But we go into the community, we tour it, we ask questions, we ask so many questions. And then we also spend some time looking at Google reviews, talking to people who work there, and really looking at the care, right? If I'm walking in the hallway and all the caregivers aren't super friendly who are working there, well, that's something I want to know because, well, if it was my mom, I would want everybody to be friendly there. So I kind of treat every place I go to how I would think about if it was somebody that I loved who had to go there, and how I would feel about it. And obviously if you're having a lower price point, sometimes we have to do a few things to make it happen, but I'm never going to want to sacrifice care for people. So it's a very it's actually a tricky question. And so we do our best to go there and to stay very in tune with the community and paying attention to Laura, our state licensing, to see if there are any marks that are against them through the state of Michigan. And that's basically how we make decisions for our people.
What about senior residents that have large staff turnover? Is that a red herring, or I mean a red flag?
Oh, yeah. For sure it is, because if they're not doing good by their employees, they're not going to do good by the people who are living there, by their clients. Sometimes you have to clean house. I understand that. Like if you change owners and you realize, oh, the people who owned this before weren't doing the best for families. Sometimes you do have to clean house and get the right people in, and we understand that. But if it's something where there are a bunch of employees and they're all leaving and they're not being taken care of by the people that are in charge, that makes a difference for us.
Now,
We
Tammi,
want it to be long-term employees. Yeah.
it seems like there's a senior residence or care facility at almost every major intersection now. And I mean, how do you sort through this? And I mean, aren't there new ones that seem to be opening up all the time too?
There are, but if you do a really thorough assessment and you know exactly what kind of care they need and the location they're looking for, and you know whether they're looking for a smaller home or a bigger home, usually there's 3 or 4 that kind of stand out as what's going to be the best for them, and those are the ones we tour. And then when we tour with them, we're really paying attention. We're paying attention to body language. We're paying attention to what feels right. You can kind of feel it's not a realtor at all, but there's a feeling that you get when when someone's gut is telling them this is the right community for me. And so that's why it's really important that we always go on all the tours with our people. And if we go to 3 and it's not right, all 3, we have no trouble going to more until we get it right.
What do you find most rewarding about your work in this area?
Oh, there's a lot of things that are really rewarding about our work. When someone says you made this a really hard decision a little easier, I feel like absolutely amazing about what I've done for families, right? That is one of the most rewarding thing because it's so heavy. When I come into their lives, sometimes it's some of the hardest times they're ever going to have, making a decision for your parent or your spouse that they have to move someplace different. And helping them make the decision on what's going to be the best place that makes everybody feel comfortable is quite a privilege. And I feel very, very proud to be able to help people in that situation. And it's very rewarding to make it lighter for them. And I always follow up after I help people find their place. About a month later, I give them a call. How's it going? What do you think? Sometimes I visit in person, sometimes it's on the phone, but how's it going? And then that's also how we find out what places are doing a good job. Obviously we thought they were doing a good job when we sent them, but following up later, how's it going? How are you liking it? Boy, that's rewarding when we get to hear, oh, I feel so much better. It was my spouse. I moved them into assisted living and now I get to be a wife or a husband again. Oh my gosh, because I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine, but I can't how heavy that's got to be and what a big responsibility is for me to get it right.
Tammi, any frustrations?
I don't know, occasionally, right? Like it's like any job. You want to do the best for families, and sometimes they're just not ready to move when I think they're ready to move, if you get what I'm saying. So sometimes I get frustrated, but at the same time, that's not my loved one. That's their loved one, and they have to sleep at night. And I always say that. I never ever want to push anybody where they can't sleep at night. This is a big decision for your family. And I want to help you sleep better with this decision, because it might be frustrating, but I want you to be able to, when it's all said and done, those regrets or not regrets are things you have to think about for the rest of your life. And I'm here to help. So that's kind of how I always try and look at it.
Tammi Gripton, Senior Care Authority. How do people find you?
They could look me up on my website, Senior Care Authority in Macomb and Oakland County. You can just type it in Google. I have a long name, but you can just go on Google or whatever search engine. You could call me. My phone number is 586-917-9170. Or you can send me an email at Tammi, Tammi, at seniorcareauthority.com.
Final thoughts. We have about 30 seconds. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about my company. And I want to thank anybody who's ever trusted me with their family member. I'm the kind of person that you can count on, and I would love to be able to help your family as well.
Your love of what you do shows through, and you do such an important service. So I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Graying today. I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Graying. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors and of course, Bloomfield Cable. Thank you again.